Coming up on Theatre Talk.
There have been a lot of reality TV shows in England, and Andrew's done some of them, and they've been very successful. But I think there's something a little bit strange and risky about casting Jesus, and I would have liked to have been asked.
Now, can this go forward without your permission?
Apparently, yes.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm the producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, we have our favorite knight back with us this week.
Well, we have our knight. I forgot about that. we have our favorite guest. Susan and I have about 5 or 6 people we love to have on Theatre Talk. They have an open invitation. We love Frank Langella and Brian Dennehy, Dame Edna. But number 1 on the Theatre Talk list of favorite guests is our old friend, Sir Tim Rice, back in New York. For Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita, welcome to Theatre Talk.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
This must be very exciting for you to be the number 1 on the Theatre Talk roster of guests.
I'm thrilled, really. I'm sure you say that to all the guys.
Well, welcome back and welcome to New York for the you're rolling the tables on Broadway now with Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, and that little show The Lion King, which is still running after 15 or 16 years.
Yes, that one seems to just keep rolling on.
Right. Now, how involved have you been in these upcoming revivals of Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita? I mean, are you at the point in your life where these shows have gone off and had lives of their own and other people reinterpret them now and you just get a call to sort of fly in and take a look?
Yes, frankly. Superstar came out of the blue. It's strange, really, because these 2 shows have come back to Broadway at the same time from totally different directions. Superstar, Des McAnuff, who I've known many, many years and admired many years, and in fact he did quite a good version of Chess when Chess was a real mess, not just a little mess. And I got to know and admire Des over the years. And some years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, he said, I want to do Superstar. And this is very exciting. And then he did it. And we kind of forgot that we'd said he could do it. Or I forgot anyway. And suddenly we heard this fantastic production in Stratford, Ontario, which Des had put together. So we went off to see it, and it was terrific. And it had such momentum that it's found its way to Broadway, although it played en route in San Diego for a few weeks.
Right.
Now, there was an article a few weeks ago about a production of Superstar that's in England that Andrew Lloyd Webber's doing a reality show about.
Uh-oh, tread lightly, Tim. You're always getting in trouble when you talk about this.
Well, simultaneously for many years,
yes.
Andrew's company have been attempting to put together an arena tour of Superstar, which is a very good idea. I'm 100% behind that, because Superstar is really a rock piece.
Yes, yeah, sure.
I mean, hard to believe, I know, for some people now, but in 1970 when it came out, it was cutting-edge rock. Yeah. And it was a #1 album here. And a lot of people in America of a certain age tend to remember it more as a rock album.
Myself
than
included.
as a show.
Yes, absolutely.
Included. You're far too young to remember it. But in England, Superstar is perceived more as a theatrical piece because the record wasn't very big in England when it came out. I mean, it was okay, it made a bit of a noise, but it was the show, really, that launched Superstar in England, whereas here it was the album. And anyway, it worked brilliantly in concert here in 1970 with the album. It worked better, to be honest, than it did on Broadway. Because I think Broadway in 1971 wasn't quite ready for rock, and we were trying to do new technology with a rock and roll band, a loud rock and roll band in the pit and an orchestra, and we were trying out radio mics which didn't quite work. So we struggled a bit on Broadway with it. It did okay, but it really worked in the arenas. And it also worked on a brilliant tour I saw of Australia in 1992 with big Aussie rock stars. Fantastic. And so we've always thought it would be great to see it become something in an arena again.
Sure.
And that's fine, but, well, I shouldn't even use the word but, really, I'll be in trouble.
Well, but we should tell our audience that you generated a little controversy because of some statements that you oppose this reality casting of
Well, I would have liked
shows.
to have been consulted about it, that's the thing, really. I mean, suddenly I'm told there's an arena tour, great. I've had a couple of meetings myself with the people who might have been involved in it, and I know the lighting guy very well. I know people involved with it, and I've always been keen on it. But then I was just slightly surprised to be told, put it that way, that it was going to be cast, or Jesus was going to be cast on reality TV. I mean, there have been a lot of reality TV shows in England, and Andrew's done some of them, and they've been very successful. But I think there's something a little bit strange and risky about casting Jesus, and I would have liked to have been asked.
Now, can this go forward without your permission?
Apparently, yes. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, to be honest, I don't want to go on about it because it turns
all
into a
right,
bigger
all right.
event. No, I mean, there's nothing I can say. I don't know how they're going to do it. My question was, well, look, I don't like the idea, but if you can tell me how you're going to do it, I might like the idea. Yeah.
Just one last question on this phenomenon, though. My actor friends who've been in the business a long time.
You have actor friends?
Yes, I believe it. A couple. They find it is slightly demeaning to their profession, that they have studied for years, they've taken this craft of acting and performing seriously, and to have it turned over to, you know, people who can dial up for their favorite Jesus Christ is a little demeaning to the professionals in the business.
Well, yes, I can understand that point of view. I mean, I'm not an actor, so I think, on the other hand, it is true to say that those, particularly in England, I can't talk for America, but in England, it is true to say that those television programs have brought quite a new audience into the theatre. A lot of people might have gone to these shows who might not have gone to the theatre at all. So that's a plus. And again, a lot of the people who emerged from these shows have been really good. Yeah. And they would have probably emerged anyway.
Right.
But I can see both sides of the argument.
Right.
I mean, it's good Saturday night TV. It's not exactly the most cerebral Saturday night television of all time, but it's fine. It's great television. Yeah. And listen, probably the Superstar TV show will just be forgotten, and it'll be, I'm sure, very successful. But
you can see the director's position if they're sidled with the audience's favorite, but who doesn't happen really to be right for the production.
Well,
but then you're stuck with this guy.
I mean, technically, I, and indeed Andrew, have the right to withhold approval of somebody in a major new production.
Yeah.
So you could go through all that?
Which approval will not be unreasonably withheld, which is a pretty vague statement.
That's a good one.
They might choose Fred Flange or Michael Riedel to play the part. And it's going to be difficult if that person has been overwhelmingly chosen by the public.
For you
you've got to say, well, maybe the public are right, because they quite often are right. Yeah. But sometimes they're wrong.
The only criterion I have is that he has to be able to walk on water. If he can do that, he's
yeah, right.
Tell us about this production, though, of Jesus Christ Superstar that's coming to Broadway, and what Des did that really impressed you so much.
Well, the funny thing is, I went up to Stratford and I saw it, and it was fantastic. You know, the crowd were with it all the way, right from the moment when an unseen voice said, if you've got a mobile phone, don't worry about switching it off because you won't hear it. And that kind of put everybody in a good mood. And it's a serious, heavy story, but there's things to enjoy in it as well. And it just went like the clappers. And at the end of it, I thought, wow, that was great. And then when I began to think, oh, why was it great? I wasn't sure. I mean, I couldn't see, it was obviously good. Yeah. And then thinking about it, I think what Des has done is he's moved it along with incredible pace. He doesn't let it stop. You know, you don't get people begging for applause. Right. There are moments when you can stomp your feet if you wish, but basically it moves like that, which is always great for any show. Mm-hmm. So you don't feel for 1 minute that it's going on too long, or any one scene. But I think what he's done on reflection, really, is he's made the characters of Jesus, Judas, and Mary, he's brought them into a kind of triangle. So they have an emotional relationship, all three of them with each other. And this isn't implying it's a sexual relationship, all three of them, but there's an element of that as well, of course. But that, I think, is the key to what he's done more than any previous production. Mm. But I have to say that when I'd sat there, I thought, I'm really enjoying this. I'm not quite sure why. I thought, maybe it's a good piece.
Yeah, but maybe those songs are pretty good.
Yeah, it just worked really well. And it was just such a nice bonus to feel that we'd get another crack on Broadway, because there was a version on Broadway in 2000 which didn't do very well.
It was not very good, yeah.
Not very good.
And that was one of those ponderous, overdone, very heavy kind of production.
It's wrong to say it's treated lightly. It's not. But when you go at it, you know, with speed and elan and excitement and enjoyment, it makes the sad moments, and there are some extremely sad moments, makes them all the more poignant. And at the end, it's really quite, you know,
Yeah.
you don't want to cheer almost.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, when you and Andrew wrote it, you were so young, and it has a youthful vitality
Yeah, it does.
to
It's-
it.
I
It
mean,
has excitement about
Sure.
doing this.
Certainly in the lyric department, you can say, well, that lyric's not really good, or you can take lines out of context and you can say, you know, that doesn't quite rhyme. And there are things I would have done differently now, but they might not have been as good because it was the youthful naivety that made it work.
Yeah.
And we tapped into something totally unintentionally. We weren't geniuses of marketing. We weren't thinking, let's do a record because that'll sell the show. None of that. We were kept being forced into corners because no one wanted to stage it, so we had to do a record. But every corner we got forced into was actually rather a nice corner.
Right.
And it kind of took off despite what we were trying to do.
You were forced to be creative.
Yes, I mean, it was great. And we did the whole thing from starting to write it and coming out with the finished album in 12 months.
Wow.
How close had you been to Andrew at that point when you started working on Jesus Christ?
Oh, very close.
You knew him
Oh, yeah.
for quite a while.
Well, yeah, I lived in his parents' flat.
Really?
Yes, so, we were very close. I mean, and also the great thing is neither of us had any distractions. We weren't really doing anything else.
Right, right.
Now we're always doing other things, some of which are very worthy things, some of which are very nice things, and we've got families and kids, and in my case, grandchildren, and indeed in Andrew's. So there weren't the distractions. And I do strongly believe that every show, and I found this particularly working on my new show, that you've got to have a young element in there somewhere. If you only have old codgers, you're going to struggle. And we were the young element back in those days, and we had great experience. We had people like Robert Stigwood, the producer, Hal Prince for Evita. We had great men, but they, great as they were, they still needed a bit of a young input.
Right.
Now, I need the young input. I still think I can write a decent lyric, but I've always said there are two graphs. There's the graph of experience, which starts there and goes up to there, and there's the graph of inspiration, which usually starts there and goes down. When they cross, you're at your peak. But if your inspiration graph is going, you've got to get some guys who've got that inspiration. So it's, you know.
Where would you say in your life what show of yours did they cross?
Evita, probably.
Evita was it.
I was 33 when we did Evita. Doesn't necessarily mean that the piece was the best thing one ever did, but I think it meant, although I do think Evita's quite good, he said immodestly, but it means that it was the piece that we knew what we were doing, and we still hadn't got too technical. We weren't, you know, being too professional about it.
And yet that was...
We hadn't a clue what we were doing, except we were doing what we wanted to do.
Yeah,
that was all we knew.
Yeah.
My son, who's just kicking off in the world of films, he said to me something very interesting. He said, you've got to make the most of your inexperience because it won't last.
That's a wonderful point. But I was going to say in Evita, which I agree with you was so brilliant, but that was the end of your work with Andrew on new pieces, wasn't it?
Yes, well, we did.
That's where you broke it off.
Yep. Well, Andrew wanted to do Cats.
Yes.
Which was a huge hit.
Yes.
And Cats didn't need a guy to write any words. So.
Although I had a charming lunch with your old friend Elaine Page a little while ago.
Right.
And Elaine was giving me the blow-by-blow of how she got involved in Cats because Judi Dench was supposed to be in it originally, and she broke her leg, and Andrew called Elaine at the last minute. And Elaine said that Andrew had brought in, I think you and Don Black and some others to have a go at memory.
Yep.
The lyrics from memory. And Elaine and Trevor was, of course, in there too, trying to write them.
Sure.
And she said throughout the previews, I was getting a different lyric from memory all the time. So was Andrew auditioning all of you guys?
Well, I didn't know about that at the time. All I knew was that they wanted a new lyric, and I did a lyric, which I never quite finished. I mean, it was always such Panic City. I mean, it wasn't their fault, but Judi Dench, you know, had fallen over and had to leave the show at the last minute, and they wanted a different take on the song, and now they had somebody who was a great theatre singer as opposed to one of the greatest actresses of all time.
Right.
And Elaine wanted, obviously, to have a lyric that was the same every night. It would be ideal.
Yeah, she said every night there was a different, he was being given a different lyric.
But I was certainly at the time unaware that anybody else had had a go. And I'm sure the same was true for Don Black and whoever else was doing it, Uncle Tom Cobley and all. But in the end, the director chose the best lyricist.
The director being Trevor Nunn. And
That
that was a good choice for his bank account,
Actually,
I do believe.
I have to say that the lyric of memory is perfect for the show. It was a major mistake for me to agree to do it.
Why?
Because I didn't know anything about the show.
But it must have been galling to have your partner.
I was a bit annoyed at the time, but it didn't really matter. You know, it's only rock and roll. That wasn't rock and roll, that one.
How come it's taken all of these years for Evita to be brought back to Broadway? I would imagine Evita would be
Well,
one of the
I
more
don't know
famous
really.
shows that
I think the timing actually is probably much better than if it had come back. I mean, it's only been 30 years since Evita was on Broadway,
Right.
as opposed to 40 odd for Superstar, although that one little one that popped in the year 2000. Well, it's come, as I said earlier, a very, very different route. It was put on in London with this brilliant young lady, Elena Roger.
who's from Argentina. Yep.
And she's superb. I've seen her in 2 or 3 other things since, and she's just wonderful. And the show got much better reviews second time round than it did first time. But I think time moves on and people think, actually, maybe Evita was quite good. Maybe those 2 twerps who wrote it sort of knew what they were doing. And it's accepted now, I think, whether people like it or not, they accept it as something that's an established piece.
There was this criticism, which I think was a misinterpretation of the piece back then, that you were glorifying these fascist leaders.
Yeah, well, that clearly wasn't our intent. Glamour, we were accused more of glamorizing this evil fascist. Well, I think there is a case for Eva Perón. I'm not saying, I mean, basically the Perón regime, particularly through him, had its faults, to put it mildly. But on the other hand, it was kind of the way it was done out there. I mean, the people they replaced and the people who replaced them were certainly no better or worse.
Yes.
But that's not the point. The point of the story was, we didn't glamorize Eva Perón. The fact that she was glamorous in a completely different way and rose from rock-bottom working class to the queen of this, and this huge goddess, virtually, of this big modern country, was quite extraordinary. And she glamorized herself. That's the story. If you take away the glamour, there's no story.
Right.
I mean, and we're sort of saying, you've got to be very careful. If there's anything more dangerous than a dictator, there's a glamorous one, there's a seductive one. But of course, most dictators are, in a way, seductive. That's half their skill. They may be vile, like Hitler, but Hitler had something which people horrifyingly latched onto.
Yeah.
Well, we also
Eva
showed...
Perón was not a Hitler. She was a, she was a, cat fighting, a wildcat fighting her way up the greasy pole.
Right. But also I think what you got at Evita was, and you see this with dictators, with Hitler, certainly the Nuremberg rallies, the tremendous sense of theatricality they have.
Yeah.
They are putting on a show to seduce the masses.
Of course, and that's really what Don't Cry For Me Argentina's all about. It's actually, I mean, I always remember some twit in England reviewing it, and I'm not saying because it was a bad review, he's a twit, he just didn't get it, because it was a big hit, it was a pop song, out of context. It was a #1 record in England, and people loved it, and yet it wasn't meant to be a pop song. It was meant to be a beautiful melody, which indeed it is, with almost meaningless lyrics, in which this person dishonestly was saying things about, I had to come out of the sun, and I was sorry, I had to step into the sun, and it was somebody seducing a huge public with beautiful words and beautiful tune, but not really saying anything at all.
Yeah.
Which in a way is what the pop record did unintentionally, because that became a big hit and people loved it, and it wasn't really analyzed. So when a critic said it was a string of cliches, and therefore it's bad, it's wrong. It was a string of cliches, and that was the whole point.
Right.
It was written as a scene in a show.
Don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is I never left you. All through my wide days, my mad existence, I kept my promise. Don't keep your distance.
And the pop song we did write, Another Suitcase, in the show, was a hit, but it wasn't anything like as big as Argentina.
Yeah. That's my favorite song of the show, though, Another Suitcase.
It's okay.
Yeah. I want to ask you about that, because in Jesus Christ Superstar, many of your works, in Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, I Don't Know How to Love Him, Another Suitcase, and in King David, Never Again, a song that I love, you really, of all the lyricists, you have a real knack for writing for women. Women in love and in disappointment in love. How are you able to pull that off?
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I'm not sure why. I always find it easier to write a love song from a woman's point of view than perhaps because I'm embarrassed from like a sort of British stiff upper lip. I don't really want to reveal my feelings because I'm an English bloke, you know, we're not meant to reveal our feelings, but if I can imagine somebody else's feelings, which I've tried to do with the various female characters I've written songs for, then maybe I find that easier. I mean, I have written, I mean, again, in the new show I'm working on, From Here to Eternity, there's a couple of big songs written from the male point of view, which I found interesting. I mean, I have done male songs.
Yeah, yeah.
But not really, you know, self-analytical, where the hell am I going type songs.
Right. I mean, but Chess has, you know, you and I
Yes.
I know him so well. He's
I think
wonderful.
I always feel that any bloke in any situation is basically being dishonest, whereas any woman is probably giving her all, and it's totally untrue, I'm sure. But
Oh, I don't know.
That's great.
so I find it easier to say, right, now what would this person really be thinking? And the bloke is always being a bit, you know, a bit sort of crafty.
In the few minutes we have left, tell us about the new project, From Here to Eternity. Whom are you writing it with?
Well, I'm writing it with an unknown composer who in my view is a genius. He's brilliant, a guy called Stuart Brayson. I've known Stuart for a long time, and he was writing pop songs when he was in his teens, and he had a little bit of success, nothing major, but I knew he was a good writer, and then he wanted to write musicals, and he wrote about 3 musicals a year for 6 or 7 years and kept sending me CDs. He wrote musicals about Wall Street, Oscar Wilde, Northern Miners, space musicals, you know, I mean, and they all had something, but I kind of wanted to say, Stuart, slow down a bit. And the music was always very good, but some of the storylines, which is the key thing to any show, some of the stories weren't necessarily, you know, great ideas. And then he came up, it was nearly 10 years ago now, believe it or not, which is awful admission in a way, because I haven't done a new show for 10 years. He came up with this From Here to Eternity, and I knew the film. I hadn't read the book at the time. And I played it and said, this is really good. There's some great songs here, and some good lyrics as well. And I said, have you got the rights? And he said, rights? I said, well, you probably, you know, so I said, I'll try and get the rights. That took me about 2 years. And it was a bit on the back burner, rather unfair to Stuart, when meantime he was writing 5 more musicals. And I got the rights eventually, and I then looked at the thing properly. We made some demos, some professional demos of his songs, tried to get some producers interested in London. Nobody was that interested. I was busy doing other things. And in the end, one producer, Lee Menzies in London, said, I think there's definitely something here. I get what you're saying. But he said, and Stuart felt this, the lyrics needed a bit of a look over. So, and the book, we needed a good book. All these things, but just this great story and this great music needed everything else, which is quite a lot. So I ended up writing all the lyrics. I've kept 1 or 2 of Stuart's titles and some of his lines, but basically I'm now the man who did the lyrics. I'm also co-producing it with Lee Menzies, and we've got a wonderful young director called Tamara Harvey, who's done quite a few excellent things in London.
Yeah, I know the name.
And the book has been written by an good old friend of mine called Bill Oakes, who worked, I first met him when he was working with Robert Stigwood on Saturday Night Fever. He produced the music for that, you know, for the movie and also for Grease, and he knows film musicals brilliantly. He kind of knows theatre as well, because he's worked on Evita when, you know, first time around. So we've got a great team together, and we've now got set designers and all that lot. All we need is a theatre, and I'm very excited about it. And I haven't done a show for 10 years. Not the last new one I did was Aida. I mean, I've done bits of things here and there. There was never anything I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And even this one, I didn't really want to do that for a bit. And then it kind of grew of its own accord. It was on my desk, it kept nagging at me. And in the end, I said, all right, I'll give in. And once we got the team together, and we've now had workshops, and it's, you know, really going well.
Well, it's what you said at the start of this interview, that you needed the young person there, and
Yeah.
and Stuart
And Tamara.
and they're hungry.
Exactly. And they kick you up the bum, you know, and you need that combination of youth and experience, which you could say was old age and inexperience, but I'd rather I'd rather look at it the other way around.
Maybe that the chart is still
Yeah, right.
going to cross right there. Well, Tim Rice, it's always a pleasure to have you on Theater Talk. You're welcome anytime you're in
3
town.
shows on Broadway.
3 shows on Broadway. Jesus Christ Superstar opening up at the Neil Simon, right?
Yes.
Yes. Evita opening up at the Marriott Marquis Theater.
Right.
And The Lion King still going strong at the Minskoff.
That's right. Well done.
And From Here to Eternity, what's the timetable for that?
Well,
Can you see that in London or?
London, and I we are really struggling to find a theatre at the moment. London's full. I mean, everybody knows we want to get it on. So I'm hopeful that I don't wish ill on any show ever.
No.
But I'm
But
hoping
things do happen.
I'm hoping that a show will just suddenly collapse.
That's right.
As long as it's not The Lion King.
Tim Wright, it's always a great pleasure. Thanks a
Okay,
lot for
thank you
being
very
on.
much.
So you are the Christ, you're the great Jesus Christ. Prove to me that you're divine. Change my water into wine, that's all you need do. Then I'll know it's all true. Come on, King of the Jews. Jesus, you just won't believe the hit you made around here. You're all we talk about, the wonder of the year. Oh, what a pity if it's all a lie. Still, I'm sure that you can rock the cynics if you try.
You can sign up for viewer updates at theatretalk.org.
Or you can Twitter us. Our thanks to the Friends of Theatre Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theatre Talk. Thank you and good night.